As the snowflakes drifted softly from the gray winter sky, they seemed to wrap the world in a blanket of silence. A lone traveler, Elias, trudged through the forest, his boots crunching on the snow-packed ground. He pulled his coat tighter against the biting wind. Though he felt the cold deep in his bones, he couldn't deny the serene beauty around him. The snow-laden trees stood like quiet sentinels, and the sky above carried the faintest glow of twilight. Elias paused, breath puffing in white clouds, and gazed at the endless expanse of trees. There was no path anymore, only snow, stretching endlessly in every direction. He wasn't lost, not exactly, but he wasn't sure he was headed where he intended either. The forest, beautiful as it was, felt vast and unyielding, and for the first time that day, he wondered if he would find shelter before nightfall. Elias had been traveling for days, moving from one small town to another in search of work. Winter had come early this year, and with it, a string of bad luck. First, the inn where he'd been staying closed its doors due to a frozen water pipe, leaving him to seek refuge elsewhere. Then, the shortcut through the forest, recommended by a friendly merchant, had proven far more treacherous than anticipated. But Elias was no stranger to challenges. Life had taught him to weather storms, both real and metaphorical. Still, the weight of loneliness hung heavy on him. With each passing mile, he longed for warmth, not just the heat of a fire but the kind of warmth that only kindness and company could provide. He thought of his childhood winters, spent laughing with family by the hearth, and felt a pang of longing he hadn't allowed himself in years. As the light began to fade from the sky, Elias was about to resign himself to spending the night in the forest. But then, through the trees, he saw it, a soft, golden glow breaking through the white haze of snow. Hope surged in his chest, and he quickened his pace. The closer he got, the more the light took shape, and soon, the outline of a quaint cottage emerged. It was small and sturdy, with smoke curling from the chimney and warm light spilling from the windows. The snow around it glittered like diamonds in the firelight, and an evergreen wreath hung proudly on the door, dusted with fresh snow. Elias hesitated, his heart pounding. Should he knock? Would whoever lived there welcome a stranger? But the cold reminded him that he didn't have the luxury of second-guessing. He stepped forward, raising his hand to the door. The door opened, and Elias was greeted by a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. She looked to be in her 60s, her face lined with years of laughter and care. She wore a shawl over her shoulders, and her rosy cheeks spoke of hours spent near the fire. "Oh, goodness. Come in, dear," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "You're half frozen, aren't you?" Elias stammered out a thank you as he stepped inside. The warmth of the cottage enveloped him immediately, and the scent of something delicious wafted through the air. A golden retriever lifted its head lazily from a rug by the fire, thumping its tail in welcome. "You poor thing," the woman continued. "What on earth are you doing out in this weather?" Elias explained his situation as May bustled around, pouring him a cup of tea and draping a thick blanket over his shoulders. She listened intently, her brow furrowing with concern. "Well," she said firmly, "you're not going anywhere tonight. It's far too cold. Sit down, and I'll get you something to eat." Before he could protest, May was already ladling a steaming bowl of stew into a bowl and setting it on the table alongside fresh bread and butter. Elias hadn't realized how hungry he was until the first bite. The stew was rich and hearty, and the bread, still warm from the oven, melted in his mouth. As they ate, May shared stories of her life in the cottage. She spoke of her late husband, who had built the house himself, and the small village a few miles away where she traded preserves for supplies. "It's a quiet life," she said, smiling. "But I wouldn't trade it for the world. This forest has a way of taking care of its own." After dinner, they moved to the fire, where May handed Elias a cup of spiced cider. The dog, Max, curled up beside him, its warmth a comforting presence. May told him about the forest's history, weaving tales of travelers who had passed through and the quiet magic of the seasons. "You know," she said softly, "kindness is like a fire on a cold night. It doesn't just warm the person it's given to, it spreads, filling the whole room." Elias found himself opening up in a way he hadn't in years, sharing stories of his childhood and the dreams he'd nearly forgotten. There was something about May's presence that made him feel at ease, as though he'd known her for much longer than a few hours. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow over the snow-covered world outside. The storm had passed, leaving the forest sparkling and still. May packed Elias a bundle of food for his journey, insisting he take extra for the road. As they stood at the door, she placed a hand on his shoulder. "Remember, Elias," she said with a smile, "you're never truly lost. Sometimes, we just need to let ourselves be found." With a heart full of gratitude, Elias stepped outside, turning back to wave one last time. May and Max stood in the doorway, framed by the golden light of the cottage. As he made his way down the path May had pointed out, Elias felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the extra layers of clothing. The kindness he'd found in the snow-covered forest would stay with him, a small ember glowing in his heart for years to come. And so, Elias continued his journey, but the warmth of that cozy cottage would remain with him always. May's words echoed in his mind. "Kindness spreads like fire on a cold night, lighting the way for those who need it most." Perhaps we all carry a bit of that light within us, ready to share it when the moment calls. If you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to subscribe to Luna Ease for more stories to soothe your soul. Sweet dreams, and may kindness guide your path.